Now, Madam Attorney General, I have like 25 seconds left. So because I'm curious, and I'd like to see you flip to the Jared Moskowitz section of the binder. I'm interested to see what staff provided on the oppo on me, and because we're in the Olympics, I'm going to give it a grade. I just want to see how good it is. So give me your best one.
So first of all, nothing is funny about mocking the Bible and holding up a Trump Bible. That's what you did. You made a joke, and I find offense to that. That's all I have to say.
I want it from the burn book.
Shame.
I want it from the burn book. Which is the best one? What you got?
Has expired. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Did you just watch the Attorney General of the United States bring a binder of opposition research to a congressional oversight hearing about child sex trafficking? Because that is exactly what just happened. While survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's global trafficking network sat in that room, waiting for the nation's top law enforcement officer to acknowledge them, Pam Bondi showed up with a burn book, a political opposition research file on the members of Congress who were about to question her, prepared by her staff, on taxpayer time, using the resources of the United States Department of Justice. And when Jared Moskowitz called her bluff and asked her to use it, she pivoted to a Bible joke. That moment tells you everything about what this hearing was really about. It was not about transparency. It was not about justice. It was about protecting the people in power from the questions they do not want to answer. And Bondi walked into that room with a prop designed to send one message to every member of that committee. We have a file on you. Choose your questions carefully. But Moskowitz had been in that room before. He knows what accountability looks like. And he had something Bondi did not bring a counter for. Receipts, documented, verified, entered into the congressional record. Let me show you exactly what he put on the table.
Several UCs as receipts. I'd like to have unanimous consent to introduce the National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, dated September 25th, 25.
Objection.
The Bondi Department of Justice memo dated December 4th, 2025.
Objection.
An article from Newsweek entitled DOJ Deletes Study Alleging Rise in Far-Right Terrorism, dated September 18th, 2025.
Without objection.
Notice article from October 3rd, 2025, Trump's directive on organized political violence could lead to increased surveillance of his critics.
Without objection.
Washington Post article, September 25th, 2025, Trump targets domestic terrorists, but only mentions the radical left.
Without objection.
Idaho Capital Sun, October 18th, 2025, rest easy, Idahoans, the No King demonstrators are American patriots.
Without objection.
Attacks on freedom of speech, what nonprofits need to know, published by the National Council of Nonprofits, the largest network of nonprofits in America.
Without objection.
The Freedom from Religious Foundation warns that Bondi memo weaponizes federal law enforcement against non-Christians and dissenting viewpoints.
Without objection.
A Ken Klipperstein blog from January 28th, 26, ICE's secret watch lists of Americans.
Notice what just happened in that clip. Pay close attention to the pattern. The National Security Presidential Memorandum objected to, the Bondi Department of Justice memo objected to, but the Newsweek article proving the DOJ deleted a study about the rise of far-right terrorism admitted without objection. The Washington Post report proving the president only targets left-wing domestic threats admitted without objection. The Freedom from Religion Foundation warning that the Bondi memo weaponizes federal law enforcement against non-Christians and dissenting viewpoints admitted without objection. The administration blocked its own documents from entering the record, but it could not block the independent reporting that proves what those documents contain. This is the pattern of a cover-up in real time. You do not object to documents that help your case. You object to the ones that expose you. And what those admitted documents expose is a Department of Justice that has been systematically redirected away from protecting citizens toward protecting the political interests of the people who appointed its leadership, the deletion of terrorism data, the surveillance of political critics, the targeting of the radical left while right-wing threats go unnamed. This is not a department operating without fear or favor. This is a department operating as a political protection operation. And it is the same department that has been sitting on the Epstein files for over a year.
And an Intercept article from February 2nd, 26, Trump calls his enemies terrorists. Does that mean he can kill them?
Without objection, the gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Attorney General Bondi.
Good afternoon.
Oh, you're right. Good afternoon. It's been a long day. I wrote this morning. We've known each other a long time, and I'll always be appreciative for your assistance when you were Attorney General in Florida after the shooting at my high school at Marjory Stoneman Douglas in my hometown of Parkland when we passed a bipartisan bill, the Marjory Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act, which was the largest policy response to a school shooting in American history. Your department also prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law a constituent of mine and former felon that had plans to kill me when he was picked up by law enforcement after he was target practicing in his backyard with 2 rifles, a scope, a silencer, 3,000 rounds of ammunition, an anti-Semitic manifesto. My name was the only name on their target list, and my kids found out about this from their friends at school. So thank you.
12 months. That is how long this administration has been running the clock on the Epstein files. And Moskowitz just laid out every single step of that delay operation on the record. So let me make sure the sequence is absolutely clear. They gave Republican influencers Part 1 of the files a selective release designed to control the narrative. Then a memo came out saying there was no list, directly contradicting what they had previously said. Phase 2 of the binders never materialized. The president called the entire matter a hoax and attacked his own base for demanding answers. Republicans voted against releasing the files in the Rules Committee. Then they refused to return to the Rules Committee at all until they could be shielded from future votes on the same question. Speaker Johnson sent Congress home a day early before the break to run out the clock. Then the Deputy Attorney General was dispatched to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell made a statement favorable to the president, and she was transferred to a minimum security facility. Nobody in the Department of Justice has explained why. Nobody has been asked to explain why on camera until today. Then the White House brought Republican members of Congress into the Situation Room, the room reserved for times of war, to pressure them into withdrawing their signatures from the Massey discharge petition. Promising appropriations, threatening primaries, the full weight of the executive branch deployed against members of their own party for trying to do their constitutional job. It did not work. 218 signatures held. The petition passed. Every member of the House, except one and the entire Senate, forced the administration's hand. The president signed the release bill for one reason only, because the majority against him was veto-proof. And even then, even after being legally compelled by the entire legislature, they withheld nearly half the documents the law required them to release. That is not transparency. That is obstruction dressed in the language of compliance.
However, the most transparent administration in American history. Before Trump, we didn't know the word transparency, apparently. It's been 12 months since you gave Republican influencers Part 1 of the Epstein files. You said the list was on your desk. Then a memo came out and said that there was no list. Phase 2 of the binders never happened. The President of the United States says the Epstein thing is a hoax. He blasts his own base for wanting the release of the files. He blamed Barack Obama. Republicans voted against the release of the files in the Rules Committee. Then they refused to even return to the Rules Committee until they could be protected from future votes on the release. Speaker Johnson sends Congress home a day early before break. They sent the Deputy Attorney General to meet with Maxwell. She says something favorable about the president. Miraculously, she gets transferred to a minimum security facility. No one can explain why. Miraculously, the leaks to the Wall Street Journal stop. We come back from break. We have the Massey discharge petition. Republicans drop a rule, a non-binding resolution trying to kill the Massey discharge petition. The White House says passing the Massey discharge petition is a hostile act. Trying to stop the necessary 218 signatures, according to Republican members that signed it, the White House brought them into the Situation Room, you know, the place where the president goes for time of war, promising things like appropriations or maybe even to primary them. People in the room say you were there. It didn't work. We get the 218 signatures. We eventually passed the Massey petition. You guys didn't release the files. You were forced by Congress. Every member of the House except one and the entire Senate. The reason the president signed it is because it was a veto-proof majority. We can't agree on anything, and yet the entire House but one member and the whole Senate forced the administration to release the files. Kash Patel under oath said to Senator Kennedy, the FBI is not in possession of any credible evidence that Epstein trafficked girls to anyone but himself.
Now we get to the claim that sits at the center of everything. Kash Patel stated under oath to Senator Kennedy that the FBI is not in possession of any credible evidence that Epstein trafficked girls to anyone but himself. He also stated under oath that Donald Trump's name appears fewer than 100 times in the Epstein files. Both of those statements are now contradicted by physical evidence in the congressional record. On the trafficking claim, the documents prove Epstein ran a worldwide sex trafficking operation, girls brought from Poland, Czechoslovakia, Russia, and Paris, modeling agencies used as pipelines, a relationship with a summer camp where he groomed girls at a picnic table, 29 associates who cut secret deals with the Department of Justice. A list of 6 co-conspirator names sitting in the files right now, fully identifiable the moment someone removes the redactions. That is not a trafficking operation involving only himself. That is a global criminal network with dozens of participants, and the FBI has the files. They have had them the entire time Patel was testifying under oath that no such evidence exists. On the claim that Trump's name appears insignificantly, Moskowitz gave the committee two metrics that are now permanently in the congressional record and cannot be walked back. Donald Trump's name appears more times in the Epstein files than God's name appears in the Bible. And Donald Trump's name appears more times in the Epstein files than Harry Potter's name appears across all 7 books of the Harry Potter series. You do not appear in a criminal file more times than a main character appears in their own story unless you are central to the narrative of that file. That is not a political argument, that is a measurement. And that measurement destroys the sworn testimony that his name appears insignificantly.
We know now that's not true. According to documents, Epstein had a worldwide sex trafficking ring. Girls from Poland, Czechoslovakia, Russia, Paris, modeling agencies sending him girls. He even had a relationship with a summer camp where he groomed girls at a picnic table. Ghislaine Maxwell says 29 Epstein associates cut secret DOJ deals. Turns out there is a list. 6 names readily available if you unredact them. Co-conspirators named, but we got them when you unredact them. Maxwell recently tells a House Oversight Committee that she wants clemency to release more names. Kash Patel under oath said Trump's name appears less than 100 times in the files. We now know that's not true. Trump's name appears more times in the Epstein files than God's name appears in the book about God. Okay, by the way, this is the Trump Bible. Move over, King James. Trump's name also appears more times in the Epstein file than Harry Potter's name appears in the 7 books about Harry Potter. Lutnick says that in 2008, he went to Epstein's home, says he had a massage table in the living room, that Epstein said he got one every day, that it was the right type of massage. He and his wife decide to leave and say they'll never be in a room with him again. Howard then says, I'm sure the Epstein stuff is all on video. He was the greatest blackmailer of all time. Well, how would Howard know that? But now the files are public, and in 2012, we found out that he and his family are on Epstein Island after Epstein pled guilty to state charges. I'm from Florida. I take my family to Disney World, not to Epstein Island. There are documents in the files that dispute the president's claim that he kicked Epstein out of his club. Allegedly, the president said that he asked Epstein to leave. Supported now, that's disputed, though, statements from the manager of the club.
This is the moment that defines the entire hearing, and it needs to be examined with precision. A document exists in the Epstein files titled Epstein Victim List. 32 names, 31 of them fully visible, 1 of them hidden behind a black marker. Think about that decision. Someone at the Department of Justice looked at a list of 32 names and made a deliberate choice. They revealed 31 victims. They protected one presumably powerful individual. They used the authority of the nation's top law enforcement office not to shield the vulnerable, but to expose them while hiding the powerful. When Moskowitz confronted Bondi with this specific redaction on camera under oath, she offered no defense, not a legal argument, not a statute, not a privilege claim, nothing, just silence. Because there is no legal defense for redacting the name of a co-conspirator in a child sex trafficking case, co-conspirators do not have a right to privacy regarding their crimes. The law is unambiguous on this point. Then there is the email, an email between Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, found unredacted by Moskowitz, containing notes about Donald Trump's prior relationship with Epstein. Moskowitz presented it in the hearing, and Bondi claimed attorney-client privilege over it. That claim is not just wrong, it is the kind of wrong that a first-year law student would catch. Attorney-client privilege protects communications between a lawyer and their client. It does not apply to emails between 2 non-lawyer criminals discussing their criminal operation. The crime-fraud exception exists specifically to prevent privilege from being used as a legal shield for ongoing criminal conduct. There is no privilege here, there never was. And the Attorney General of the United States knows that, which means her privilege claim was not a legal argument. It was a delay tactic, delivered on camera, under oath, by the person whose job it is to ensure the law is applied correctly. This is Bondi's strongest defense, so let us dismantle it completely. When she could not answer the questions about the Epstein files, she held up photographs, pictures of individuals she described as dangerous, undocumented immigrants. She listed their crimes: assault, arson, rape. The argument being that she is focused on prosecuting the real threats and that Moskowitz's focus on Epstein implies he does not care about these other victims. That is a logical fallacy. It is called whataboutism, and it is her strongest defense because it has nothing to do with the law and everything to do with fear. Here is the legal reality. The existence of one set of criminals does not remove the government's obligation to investigate another set of criminals. The Department of Justice employs tens of thousands of people. It is fully capable of prosecuting violent crime while simultaneously releasing documents that Congress passed a law requiring it to release. The prosecution of an arsonist has zero legal bearing on the question of why co-conspirator names in a child sex trafficking case are being hidden behind a black marker. The venue was a congressional oversight hearing specifically about the Epstein files. Bondi did not cite a single statute. She did not invoke a single legal privilege that actually applies. She held up photographs of people who have nothing to do with the question she was asked. That is not a defense. That is proof that she has no defense. That is the moment that outlasts everything else said in that hearing room today. The Attorney General of the United States sat in front of the survivors of a global sex trafficking network, women who reached out to the Department of Justice, women who were ignored, women who traveled to that hearing room and sat behind Pam Bondi waiting for the nation's top law enforcement officer to turn around and acknowledge that they exist. She did not turn around. She did not acknowledge them. She did not pledge to meet with them. She did not offer a single word to the people her department is constitutionally sworn to serve. She waited for the clock to expire and pivoted to her photographs. That is not a legal failure. That is a moral one. And it answers the question of whose interests this Department of Justice is actually serving. It is not serving the survivors. It is not serving the American people. It is serving the political protection of the president who appointed its leadership. That is a conflict of interest so fundamental that it does not just undermine the integrity of this department, it defines what this department has become. Here is where the accountability path leads from here. Contempt of Congress is the most immediate tool. Moskowitz demanded the unredacted documents on the record. He received a refusal. Congress can vote to hold Bondi in contempt. The evidence is already in the record. Disbarment proceedings are available without a congressional vote. The conduct displayed in this hearing, misrepresenting legal privilege, using Department of Justice resources for personal political opposition research, claiming privilege over communications that have no legal basis for protection, are violations of legal ethics that can be reviewed by state bar licensing boards right now. And future prosecution remains on the table. The obstruction evidenced in this hearing, the deletion of terrorism data, the improper redaction of co-conspirator names, the transfer of Maxwell following a statement favorable to the president, these are acts that can become the basis for criminal charges the moment the political shield is removed. But right now today, the immediate consequence is the one that cannot be undone. The transparency lie is dead. The files exist. The names of the co-conspirators exist. The Department of Justice has them. Congress passed a law requiring their release. The president signed it only because he had no choice. And they are still being withheld. Pam Bondi brought a burn book to a hearing about child sex trafficking survivors. The survivors stood up in that room today. They are still waiting.